Hey everybody, my name is Eric Newman. I am the founder of a startup called Sprawly. And just before we get started here, I'd like to give you guys a little bit of an introduction about who I am and why you should bother actually listening to me. So I have been a professional software engineer and really a professional futurist for the last 20 years. I have worked at NASA on mission control software. I have worked in video games in the massively multiplayer online gaming industry. I've worked in finance. I wrote software for the Ministry of Health of the government of Belize. And in college, I started my own startup called Decision Desk, which was the company that brought performing arts auditions into the modern era with multimedia, including video. And so that's where I really, really got interested in video. And after I left Decision Desk, I became very, very interested in virtual reality. So really, I've spent the last 3 years freelancing and working on various virtual reality projects to really get an understanding of what's going on. And for the last year, I've been working on Sprawly, which I'm going to drop a link for you guys into the box right here. I've been working on Sprawly, which is an interactive, it's an authoring tool and a playback system for interactive 360 VR content. So yeah, with that, I guess let's go ahead and get started on some slides. So at this time, it might be useful for you to take a moment to follow me on Twitter. Follow me on Twitter, because I'm going to be giving you guys obviously a talk right now. And then at the end, I'm going to be taking questions. I'm going to be trying to take questions from the chat, but it might be easier just for you guys to tweet at me since I can't really have the chat open and my slides open at the same time. So follow me here on Twitter. I am at Eric Newman. I hope you guys know what this is. This is one of, if not the original film camera. So I want to talk to you guys today a little bit about the history of film. And the reason why I want to do that is because I think it's very, very relevant to what's going on in the world of 360 video today. It's very easy to look at 360 video and to think to yourself, oh, well, this is the future. And so we don't need to look back. We only need to look forward. And in a lot of ways, I agree with that statement. But there's also a lot to be learned from looking at the past. In some ways, virtual reality today is where the internet really was and computing in general was in the early to mid 90s. But 360 video, interestingly enough, is more like what was happening in film around the end of last century, or almost actually the end of 2 centuries ago. So let's talk a little bit about the history of film. The motion picture camera was invented in the 1890s. It's a really, really long time ago. And it would have been very easy for these people to say like, oh, look, pat ourselves on the back. We have invented something new. We've invented the motion picture camera. We're done. And to some extent, that's kind of what the people who were using film cameras were doing. So 1890s, the film camera gets invented. And the thing that people are using the film camera for is they are just, they're just pointing them at plays. They're taking these film cameras, they're going into playhouses, and they're pointing their camera at plays. And they're literally just recording from one location, no movement, no sound, no color, no editing, no anything. They're just recording plays. They're pointing this new medium technology at the old medium. And then they're kind of wondering why they're not getting something super compelling out of the other side. And it's because they were just adapting the old stuff to the new. That's very much where we are today with the world of 360. We have this brilliant, amazing new capability, and we're pointing it at the same sorts of things that we would point a film camera at. We're pointing it at, linear narratives, and we're pointing it at, sports events. We're basically just dropping a 360 camera anywhere where we would normally want to put a lot of other cameras and saying, okay, we're good. Let's call it a day. But that's not nearly enough. So let's talk about what happened after the film camera was invented to see if we can't sort of try and glean what's going to happen in the near future with 360 videos. So film cameras invented in the 1890s. Then the ability, this is actually kind of amazing. You would think that moving a motion camera while you're filming is completely obvious, but it's not. It's really not. So it wasn't until 1898, 8 years later, that the first camera that had built-in panning capabilities was put out. What happened very, very shortly after that is one of my favorite moments in cinema history, which is that, I'm going to switch back here. So what happened after that is one of my favorite moments in cinema history. So we had an event, and the event that occurred was called the Great Train Robbery. Hopefully you guys out there have heard of this, but the Great Train Robbery is largely considered to be the world's first ever actual film. Everything before that, like they were moving pictures and stuff like that, but the Great Train Robbery was largely considered to be the first film. And so why was it considered to be that? It wasn't even really because of what we would today consider to be a technical advancement. It's considered to be the first film because it used cuts, it used editing, and had continuity across scenes. So let that percolate in your mind for a second. So before the Great Train Robbery, which happened in I think 1901 or 1902, everything that people were doing was just pointing these cameras at one thing. And then we had this landmark event. The Great Train Robbery occurred, and it changed everything. It created this new medium out of what was essentially just a novelty. Sound familiar? Right before the Great Train Robbery happened, a lot of people were saying, oh, these movies, these moving pictures, they're not going to go anywhere. Why would I do that? I'd rather just go see the play, or I'd rather just go, to wherever it was happening. It's a little bit of usage in journalism that people saw as being practical, but largely they saw the technology as being frivolous. Then we get this Great Train Robbery, and all of a sudden people get it. And within just a few years, we have movie studios. Literally, like in the year before and after, there went from being no movie studios to there being like 6 or 7 movie studios. And then really quickly after that, we start to get other developments. We have all kinds of things that are created in Russia. They have the montage film movement, which is where a lot of the advancements that we have in editing got established. Most importantly, the language of film was established in the next 5 years after the Great Train Robbery. The things that we take for granted today: establishing shots, reverse shots, key lighting. Speaking of lighting, sweet lighting today, right, guys? But yeah, so many things that we take for granted were all created right then. So then let's go back to slides. So here we have a linear editing rig, just so you guys can see what that looks like. This is how people used to do their editing, right? We've come a long, long way. And then it's not until 1927, almost 30 years later, we get sound. And obviously this is a revolution, right? This changes the whole nature of the movies, not least of which is that it makes movies accessible to young viewers who can't read. But just think about that. It took 50 years from the invention of the motion picture camera to it even having sound. And then quickly after that, we get to the point where we have color. And that's in 1932. Obviously, everybody knows The Wizard of Oz, very colorful, blew a lot of people's minds, starts out in black and white and transitions to color in the middle. They literally had color film and black and white film taped together for projecting through. So what we have here is a 50-year timeline from the invention of the film camera until what we today would consider to be anything remotely like, an actual full-on movie. And so what I think you should take from that is that where we are today with 360 is so early. It's so naive to look at that and say this is a complete medium. Um, and one way to look at it might be to say, well, 360 isn't its own medium. It's actually just the next technological advancement in film. And this is definitely an interesting article on that, or argument. And I hope that somebody has a desire to discuss that later in question time. But I think that it is a distinct new medium for a number of reasons, which we can go into. But but the point is that the medium that we have today is so incomplete, right? So I mean, you have so many issues that come with 360. Um, you have things that can happen behind your head, and there isn't any way to see them or know that they're going on there. You have narratives that are moving in a straight line from beginning to end, which kind of makes people feel like a passenger inside of the head of their character. There's tons of issues about how you even do lighting and how you record sound. There's just so much that has been made new again with the advent of 360. Oh, sorry guys, I forgot. I have one extra bonus slide here. So between 1932 and today, there have been almost no major sort of universal updates to the way that film is made. Obviously, there's the transition from analog to digital, but that didn't really change that much in terms of, like the basic fundamental ways that we do this stuff. The one exception that I can find being something called color grading. Color grading is interesting. It's basically when after you've done everything else to your film, when it's all totally ready, you then pass it through a program which you can use to filter out or filter in colors. This technique was basically started. This is sort of like a trivia slide. This was largely started after the massive success of it in The Matrix. In The Matrix, they sucked out all of the red, or almost all of the red, out of all shots that take place in The Matrix. And they sucked out almost all of the green in all of the scenes that take place out of The Matrix to create these two distinct feels. And you can see this is very green looking, and this is very blue feeling, and it's because they both have, I think they pulled the blue out here and the green out here. So this one, yeah, they look opposite like that. Anyway, it was very, very effective. And now basically every movie you've seen since The Matrix has been color graded. So just good to remember that the medium is not necessarily complete, even one like film. Okay, so let's take a look at 360 video. First question is, what the heck even is it? Let me switch back to chat here. So I'm guessing that you guys are all fairly experienced with VR. Can you guys comment in on the chat here and say how experienced you are with 360 video? Like, have all of you guys at least watched some 360 video? So and so. Okay, sure. And have you experienced that on a headset or on your phone or on like a click and drag desktop browser? Okay, headset, both Samsung 360, desktop browser, both. Okay, cool. So it sounds like, I mean, you guys must be seeing that 360 video is starting to pop up everywhere, starting to show up all over the place. So let me just give you guys a little brief explainer of how 360 video actually works, just in case anybody who's out there who doesn't know how it goes. So is captured with, obviously a 360 camera, and it can be viewed on either a headset or a smartphone or a desktop, and it immerses you completely inside of itself. It allows you to see everything that's going on around you. There's a variety of ways that it can be filmed. We have to some extent, we have 3D functional We have a lot of problems still with the way that sound is mapped to your head when you're watching the video, but it's still pretty breathtaking. And one of the coolest things you can see is if you put a small child like this into a headset and put them into a 360 video, you will pretty universally see that they are immediately engrossed by it. Okay, so this is where we were only like 18 months ago. This was the state-of-the-art, bleeding edge, most advanced way to capture 360 video, like, only a year and a half ago. And I kind of hate these rigs. I love GoPros, but I kind of hate these rigs because the practicality of them is really, really bad, right? Like, you have to have a whole bunch of cameras, you have to turn them all on, you have to sync them all, you have to deal with each of their individual failure modes, heat and battery, all of this stuff. Plus, they're kind of sloppy looking and they look like monstrosities and they distract anybody that you're trying to film. Anyway, this is where we were 18 months ago. This is where we are today. Big difference, right? So Samsung is now shipping these guys for, I think, $199 as of this week on sale. I have a Gear 360 and I am absolutely in love with it. I'm also teaching a class with Kronos Global Academy here in Seattle, and about half the class picked up Gear 360s, and the other half picked up the new Nikon camera. But the point is that a lot of these new cameras are coming out, and they look like this, right? So whereas this is a bunch of GoPros stuck together, you have to buy a rig or make a rig. You have to buy these cameras and fill them each with an SD card. When you want to film, you have to take each card out and stitch it together using an elaborate and sometimes failure-prone stitching system. It's an art, not a science. That compared to this, you put this thing on the end of a selfie stick, you sync up with your phone, you can preview what you're shooting all the time, you can see what's going on while you're doing your shots, you can instantly look back and see it in a headset, like in just seconds after you're done shooting it. It's like a massive, massive leap forward. And we're only 18 months in. So, think about how big of a gap that is, how big of a jump that is as compared to, 1890s to 1932, right? We're not making that kind of a jump right now. We're still in that early camera-oriented mode. So these newly emerging cameras, these are going to become very, very dominant. Something that I see is that these cameras are, because they're getting to be so cheap and because the content is so compelling, and the numbers really do show, by the way, that 360 video attracts and holds on to a much stronger audience than traditional flat video. These cameras are going to be massively, massively popular, and they're actually, a lot of these camera stores are having trouble keeping them in stock for the holiday season. If you want one of these 360 cameras, I highly recommend you go out and get a Samsung 360 today. It's pretty awesome. Anyway, the major thing that these cameras bring about is that they bring about what I call the death of stitching. So stitching is a process where you take the images out of each individual lens and you put it together into one picture. It's a huge pain. It's different for every different camera rig. And these new compact cameras, they largely have stitching either happening inside the camera or inside a native app that comes with it for your phone or for your desktop. It's basically one-click stitching today. So you either stitch it in the camera, or as you're pulling information off of the camera, the phone stitches it, or you sync files from your phone to your computer. You click and you drag those files into a program, and then what you get out the other side is a stitched file. So actually, let me just show you guys what this even looks like. Let's take a look. Just in case you've never seen what a 360 video looks like when it's stitched but not wrapped around the inside of a sphere. So it looks like this. You can see it's distorted. And what we have is we're using this kind of distortion that's called equirectangular distortion. And the image is just designed to fill up the whole space so that when you wrap it around a sphere, there's no edges. Just in case you hadn't seen that. The point is that with these new cameras, stitching is going away entirely. Yeah, Jay Jickelson? Yeah, it does still overheat. This is a problem. Tweet at me and I'll remember so that I can show you at the end. There's an interesting heat solution that some people have worked up. But the point is that with the death of stitching, these cameras are now accessible, right? The stitching is a long and complicated technical process. And this is going to start coming up again and again in the rest of this talk. The boom in pretty much every major industry, especially media industries, the boom comes not when the technology gets created. The boom comes when the technology reaches a point that creatives, not technologists, can use it. So when the film camera was still a box that you had to, slap a slide of silver mirrors in it, we only saw like photographs even from specialists, from experts. When Kodak came on the scene and created, easily usable film camera, there was an explosion of film that came out of that, right? And from that moment on, just everybody started taking pictures all the time. And that's kind of the moment that we're approaching with 360 right now. So far, it's really been the domain only of experts and specialists with thousands of dollars to spend and countless hours to spend on just producing something which may or may not have an audience or a place to go. But now you have affordable prosumer cameras. You have Facebook and YouTube and Sprawly, where you can post your 360 videos and let anybody see it very, very easily. And I think we're going to see a tremendous, tremendous output from that. Okay, so the death of stitching is going to bring about a lot of new stuff. So then here's another question. A lot of people talk to me and they say, well, 360 video isn't VR. And to those people, I say, bah, boo, for shame. That's kind of like a thing that people do. It's common for nerds in the technology world to get very, very defensive about their technology. And with VR, there's actually a pretty good reason for this. There has been, in the past, a few cycles of what's called the technology hype cycle. And the technology hype cycle, actually, I'll show you guys. Should have put a slide in here for that. But it looks like this. Technology hype cycle. It's the technology trigger, which is the creation of a new tech. There's the peak of inflated expectations, which is when everybody's like, oh my God, this technology is going to change the world. It's going to be everything. Then there's the trough of disillusionment, which is when people are like, oh, hey, it didn't change everything. The slope of enlightenment as we gradually figure out what the technology is actually good for. And then the plateau of productivity, which is when the technology just becomes a part of our everyday life. So a good example is like, mobile. Back when we invented smartphones, people were like, oh my God, smartphones are everything. And then sort of like we had Windows Mobile and Palm Pilots and a whole bunch of disappointing things that didn't quite meet up to our expectations. Then we realized that mobile wasn't for everything. We sort of accepted that it was only for things that, you could do with your fingers. And then we've hit this plateau of productivity where smartphones and mobile tablets are a part of our lives. Anyways, in VR, we're somewhere either here or here, depending on who you ask. And people are afraid that if we let people think that 360 video, or rather, if we let people think that any kind of content that isn't stellar, that isn't mind-blowing, into the name of what we call VR, that we're just going to prolong this trough of disillusionment. The expression in the VR world is called poisoning the well. So some people think that 360 video fits into this category. And I'm here to tell you that those people are wrong. 360 video is not poisoning the well. 360 video is, in many ways, is the well. But before we get there, let's talk about what actually even is virtual reality. So the definition of virtual reality that I like to go with is that virtual reality is any technology that replaces your environment with a virtual one, places you, in this situation, it's Flynn here from Tron, right? Places you into a virtual world, not the other way around. So, according to Google and Google's official technical definition, that world needs to be artificially generated, digitally generated, in order for it to be considered artificial or virtual reality. Um, but if you've ever seen anybody watch a 360 video, you know that they're not there. They're not next to you anymore. They're in that other world. They're underwater with those sharks. You know, they are skydiving. They're flying with the eagles, whatever it is. Their world has been replaced by another one. Their reality has temporarily been replaced by one that is virtual to them. So I think that 360 video is very, very much that. Just for converse and to round out the definition, on the other side, we have augmented reality. So just so you can understand why my definition is what it is. So I think virtual reality is when we place you into a virtual environment. And augmented reality is when you place virtual objects into your real environment. Hopefully I don't have to tell you guys what this is. You should all know it. This is one of the most famous sequences in all of film. But this is Star Wars: A New Hope. And we have a hologram of Leia. And Leia, as you can see, she is placed in the world here. She's standing on a table. R2 has like taken care of that for us. And she appears to exist in one actual physical location within the world. Now, nobody thinks she's really there, but she is a virtual object in a physical world. So she's augmented reality here. Anyway, this is Unity. This is a game engine. And this is the way that most VR content is being made today. It is a pretty easy tool when compared to coding straight up, you know, writing just lines and lines and lines of code. Compared to that, this is much easier. You can click and drag and move stuff around, but there's still a lot of very complicated options. There's still a lot of software, actual code that needs to be written. There's a lot of ways it can go wrong. It's not, it's not a point and click solution, so to speak. It is a whole new realm that you need to learn how to use in order to make content. And it is getting easier and easier. I don't want you guys to think that I'm hating on Unity. I love Unity. I actually have built a ton of stuff in Unity, and I have used it over and over and over again, and I hope to use it a lot more in the future. But I am a software engineer. Now, I happen to be a software engineer who is also a creative, but I think that, sort of looking at this in the alpha nerd way of saying like, oh, only stuff that comes out of tools like this are virtual reality. There's a couple of things that I don't like about that statement. Number one, it sort of smacks of feeling threatened, which I think that some people do feel threatened in the VR industry. They feel threatened by VR because it's so easy to pick up a camera and go out and make a compelling experience, and it doesn't require hours and hours of code and decades of experience. So I think there's that. And I also think that it smacks a little bit of, of sort of like the insular nature of the VR community. A lot of people who are in the VR community, they come from games. They're gamers themselves. They work at gaming companies, either, VR gaming companies professionally, or they work on indie games, including VR things on their own. But they look at anything that isn't a game and they don't really get it. And they don't really interact with people who are working on VR stuff that isn't games. And I've seen this a lot. I've sort of experienced 3 geographic VR communities in New York and here in Seattle and in San Francisco. And actually, the Seattle scene here is pretty open to this. There's a lot of people doing non-gaming stuff. But definitely in San Francisco, like so many people that I run into are working on VR, and they're like, "Oh yeah, it's just games." And I love that they're doing that, and I think that we need that kind of passion. But I just, I think there's more, and 360 video is a part of that. a big part of this is a big question of whether or not 360 video even is VR. If people dismiss it today, then the future is very bleak. If people buy into it today, then the future is very exciting. Part of the reason why I think it's so important for us to consider us in the technical end of this, to consider 360 video to be a part of VR, is that this battle's already done. If you go and you talk to Martina, I will be talking a lot about interactivity in a second. And I'll address the question about 3D at the end. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. What were we talking about? Oh, yeah. So if you talk to most people in the world today still haven't tried VR, right? And there's two kinds of people. There's people who don't like VR, and then there's people who have tried it. Of the people who have tried it, most of them will tell you, oh man, I had this amazing experience. I got this weird cardboard box thing. It came to me from my newspaper, or it came to me, I got it at a conference, and I went home and I stuck my phone in it, and I was on Mount Everest, you know, or I was underwater, or I was floating through space, you know, or I got to see, you know, what's going on in Syria. And oh my God, VR is amazing. VR is the new medium of the future. All I want to do is watch VR movies all day long. And what you'll notice if you pay attention to the way that these people, these you know, nubile VR audience members, the way that they speak about this is that they honestly have no idea that anything other than 360 exists. They don't know that there are 3D games. They don't know that there's the Oculus Rift. They don't know that there's hand tracking in the Vive. They only know that they put this box on their face and they were transported to another world. And so to them, that is VR. And we should be embracing those people, not trying to dissuade them. Okay, so enough of my diatribe about this. Let's talk about where we are going. So, Martina, you asked me how interactive do I foresee this going? I foresee 360 video as going into a place where it's going to be very, very interactive. So, like I said, there are a lot of problems in the medium today. The number one problem is that the power of 360 video is that you can put stuff behind people's heads, but the weakness of people's videos is that if I'm looking over here, anything behind my head, I'm missing. So at the very, very least, something that the medium needs to even hit like a bare minimum spec, like a minimum threshold of completeness, is you need to have what we at Sprawly call dwell. You need to be able to create 360 experiences where you can have short or long looping scenes where you can place a viewer and allow them to stay there until they're ready to move on. So a couple of good examples of how you might use this. You know, you can imagine putting somebody in like a murder mystery and have them sitting in the parlor, you know, looking around at all of the ornate filigree, you know, the bookshelves and the tea settings and all this stuff, and looking for all of the various clues that you, the filmmaker, have baked into their surroundings. They might want to stay there for 10 minutes. They might want to stay in that moment for an hour while they try and take in all of the minute details, right? You could imagine like a J.J. Abrams style trailer where every second of it could be revealing some kind of hint or some kind of clue about what's going to happen in the movie, where people want to like hang there and look around. Another great example is, you know, we have this situation that we talk about in, what's it called? In Sprawly, that we call the Morpheus situation. And the Morpheus situation is where, you know, you're talking to somebody, you, the viewer, is talking to some character in a movie or a piece, and they give you a choice, right? And so rather than just having at the end of the video clip, like two menus pop up that allow you to choose which one you want to go to, the way that we handle this is we have a feature called backlooping and hotspotting. So if you imagine Morpheus talking to you, and at the end of the scene, he says like, you know, you have a choice. Do you want to take the red pill or the blue pill? And you can see both of his hands. And so the way that we originally built Sprawly is that at this moment, the video would freeze, and you could choose from either one of these options, and each one of his hands becomes now interactive with a hotspot. If you click on one of them, it takes you to another video. We now have even better technology that makes it so that at the end of a clip, you can actually loop back and start looping just at the last few seconds. So if you film, oh, I can't remember his name, not Hugo Weaving. What's his name? Who plays Morpheus? Shoot. Anyway, if you film Morpheus, and at the end of his talk, you give him, thank you, Lawrence Fishburne. You have him stand there and move for a moment. You just keep filming him after he's done speaking, and we can loop over that and make it look natural. Okay, so I'm going to blow through a couple of these last slides that I have, and then I'm going to give you guys a live demo of Sprawly. Fingers crossed that it'll work. I'm chewing up a lot of bandwidth here using the video, and 4K streaming 360 video is pretty tight. So let me just cook through a couple more of these slides. Okay, so where are we going? First of all, ubiquitous 360 cameras. These things are going to be everywhere. We sort of already talked about that. The next thing is interactivity. This is a picture of Sprawly. I'm going to give you guys a full-on demo of this. Just blow through it. This is a picture of a light field camera. So somebody asked me about the excuse me. Somebody asked me about 3D. 3D is a really complicated thing to accomplish with 360 video. And so basically the reason why it's so hard is because in a normal flat 3D camera, that sounds weird, rectangular 3D camera, what you have is you just have two cameras, and they are set the same distance apart as the average human interpupillary distance, and then you present them to the brain in such a way so that each camera's content can only be seen by one eye. So this is great, but the minute that you start turning your head in 360, your eyes are shifting between angles, which means that the offsets, the offset of edges, the offset of lines, the offset of points that each eye sees changes as you change your angle, which means that the 3D breaks as soon as you're not like looking within like a 15 or 20 degree angle of the center of the original viewpoint. So what people are starting to do is they're using cameras like this, and then they're using really, really nasty math to intersperse lines of 3D, or essentially multiple recordings of different angles, and then shift between them. It's basically like an audio mixdown, but with video. So you can create this video mixdown where as you turn your head, you shift between these various different fixed 3D viewing points. If you're sensitive, if you're really paying attention, it's not super comfortable. Another way that some people are doing this is that they're actually doing just 3D in the front of their shots and allowing it to be flat all the way around. So only if you're looking right like in the center of the camera, like in the quote-unquote front, do you have 3D. But the real answer is that I think we are going to move beyond what we think of as 3D. I think we're going to move beyond optical 3D and into some other, like more holographic 3D cameras. So this, what we're looking at here, this is the Jaunt camera. This thing is obscenely expensive and high quality. And each one of these is a light field camera. And what a light field camera is rather than having a fixed focal point while you shoot, these cameras have an almost, well, I guess it's not infinite, but they have a very, very wide focal range. So basically, you can film, and everything that's within the possible depth of field of the camera is recorded all at the same time. What that means is that after the fact, each one of these cameras has produced video that you can focus forward or backward in the depth of the piece. And there is some analysis work that can be done, and we're entering now into the realm of my speculation, Because you can focus forward and back, what that means is that you see where the edges of certain objects are crisp, at what focal length, which means you can calculate how far away each edge is from the camera. And if you add all that information up, you basically have a 3D model of the room, or a 3D model of the scene that's taken from this one point. You basically are entering into, holographic capture. Now, something that's interesting about holograms that we don't think about, we haven't been primed for from our experience in science fiction, is that how do you capture the back of a hologram, right? So in Star Wars, Leia is squatting like this in front of R2 when she films this shot. Let me see if I can actually find that. No, looks like no. I think you should be able to tell from this slide that we have here. But the point is that how the heck did R2 capture the back of her body? If he was standing here filming her from this location, obviously we could know that he would be able to see every front-facing edge of her. But how did he capture the back? Maybe he has some sort of advanced laser bouncing future technology. I don't know, but we're not there yet. So the limitations of these kinds of cameras are that anything that you shoot, you get these beautiful, amazing, potentially 3D models out of it, but the back shell of them is still open. So that is a limitation that we need to fix. Maybe what we'll do is we'll have lots of little floating drone cameras or something like that. Who knows? And so here is a camera that is actually explicitly for creating 3D content. Not just 3D, but really what I would consider to be holographic content. This is the Matterport, as you can see on this lovely lady's shirt. It's largely used for capturing the insides of high-quality real estate locations. So what you do is you set this camera up in the middle, and it slowly spins around. And basically what you have inside here is that these are essentially like 3 Kinect style cameras. And you can see they look a lot like it too, right? So what this does is it scans the whole room and it produces a point model of the room. It produces an actual 3D model. Still has the Princess Leia problem though. It can only see faces that are visible from its point of view. The other problem with this is that this doesn't film video yet. We are probably 5 or 10 years off from being able to have real point cloud video that we can capture this way. Just because it's so expensive to produce it in high fidelity. So maybe what we're going to actually end up doing is some sort of combination. You could almost imagine like scanning a room with a rig like this, and then filming people with a rig like this, and compositing the two together. That would produce a sort of a Minority Report kind of effect. If you remember in Minority Report when he watches the video of his ex-wife, sort of like that. Okay, so actually we're going to pause here and we're going to go directly into, now we're going to go into actually before I do, Martina, was that sufficient? Did that answer your questions about, or sorry, Grant, did that answer your questions about 3D? Yeah, okay, great. And hit me up here with any other questions that you have. So I'm going to do a super quick demo for you guys just of Sprawly, and then I will come back for a sort of a closing motivational statement. So let's go now, and I'll give you guys a quick demo. Live demos are the bane of all software people. Okay, so let's take a look at this guy. So this is a real simple piece of content that I built. It is a virtual tour of the Capilano Suspension Bridge. And in fact, let me just drop for you guys a link. You should be able to actually view the piece of content there. Should work on any desktop browser and on any Android phone. iPhones are still, we have a little bit of weak support for them because they're really hard. But so what this is, zoom in, we can see each one of these individual balls here is a scene. A scene is a combination of a 360 video that's been rigged up with hotspots and other interactivity layered on top of it. You can see these arrows indicate the flow from one hotspot to the next, the ways that you can move from scene to scene. And so basically everything centers on this trailhead. That's where the story starts. And then from the trailhead, you can go to the tree walk, which is kind of cyclical and ends back at the trailhead. Same with the trout pond and waterfall walk. Or you can go on the edge walk, which also sort of shakes out around as a big circle, comes out and ends up coming back. Edge walk. There it is. So how did I actually make this? Well, I started by just dragging and dropping a 360 video right on here, which uploads it into the system. Sprawly automatically transcodes any 360 video. That does not mean that we handle stitching. You have to upload stuff that's already equirectangular, but what you upload, you can upload up to 4K, 60 frame a second, 360 video, and our system will automatically transcode that to low, medium, and high resolutions so that we can do really rapid streaming. So here I am, I'm clicking into a scene, and there we go. So in this scene, this is the trailhead. And so if we want to, we can loop on this video. You can see there's a little bit of motion here, not a lot. There's some people walking in the background. And we can work right on top of the video while it's actually playing if we want. So there, I just made a really ugly, stupid hotspot. So let's get rid of that. And let's pause because the noise is distracting me. But so then, basically any area that I want to make interactive, in this scene, most of the interactivity, actually all the interactivity is based on this signpost here. The way that I created these is I just click, 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 draw over the area, close the box, give it a name, and then I choose the action that I want it to take. Now, the actions that we have available to us is that we can have it either switch between scenes, which is what creates those arrows on that map. We can play audio. We can create a video overlay, or we can have a web link that opens up another web browser. We can also change the color of the hotspot if you want to have it visible. Oops, I didn't actually do it. So if we leave this like this, then you will actually see a green box over this sign in the world. Or we can make it totally invisible like that. We can do the same for the gaze over. And then we also have the ability to make it so that just as your gaze flicks over this thing, it actually plays a sound. That's sort of an experimental feature, trying to make this feel more like an old school point and click adventure. So let's get rid of my new that I just added here, because there's already some in here. And I'll show you guys what this actually looks like. So you notice it starts out, it's pretty blurry, but it plays right away. And so I'm streaming this to you guys. So this video is streaming into my computer and then streaming out to you at the same time. So it's not bad. And you can see that it pretty quickly buffers up to a higher quality video. And you'll notice that this scene just sort of like loops and loops and loops over itself. So if I want to, I can go like to the trout pond just by hovering my reticle over that spot, or by clicking on it. So here we are, nice, beautiful, serene trout pond. Let's continue on to the waterfall because it's gorgeous. And I captured all this stuff with my Gear 360 while I was up in Canada a few weeks ago. Let's just wait for this to buffer up. Okay, that's the mid-grade. Should hit sharpness any second now. Well, all right, it's going slow. We are using a lot of bandwidth. Okay, so I can just head right back to the trailhead, and now here I am just where I started. And of course, if you hit this page with an Android device and you have Google Cardboard, you will see an optional cardboard button that'll come up right here that you can hit, and you can do all of this same interactivity just by gazing at these hotspots. So that's Sprawly. It's totally free to sign up and to use. I would love it if every one of you guys on this call right now would sign up and join and start making 360 content. I know not everybody's got a 360 camera yet, but I know that that's going to change. And we do have a number of other features that have to do with sublooping and even more interactivity, but I am out of time. You guys will have to explore that on your own. All right, closing statement. I think the most important thing to take out of this is that 360 video is real, it's important, it's here to stay, but it is not anywhere close to being done, right? We are still looking for our great train robbery moments. We're still looking for, that first real amazing piece of content that's going to knock this thing open and show people what the capabilities of the platform are. A big part of what that means in the early stages of new technologies and of new mediums is you really need to be thinking about what kind of content is going to be a good match for the capabilities. Really try and think of not only something that's going to work, but something that could only be made with a 360 camera. Right? The reason why the Great Train Robbery was so successful was not only was it a technical feat, but it was something, the actual piece of content was something that nobody had seen anything before that was like it. Because you couldn't do the Great Train Robbery on a stage. You couldn't do it as a play. You needed horses, you needed people running on top of a moving train. There's so much motion that was captured by the motion picture camera that it just blew audiences' minds. That said, you need to walk the line to that and trying to do things that aren't going to work well. So I have a couple of examples here just real quick to inspire you guys of early pieces of content that I feel like really nailed this. I'm actually going to talk just about animation because it shows a good timeline. But if you notice old-timey cartoons like Steamboat Willie here, the first ever Disney cartoon, they're really, really high contrast. They're really, really simple stories because it was so expensive and so difficult to make, and because they didn't have color and they weren't sure if the audience would know what they were even looking at. So they make this guy really, really dark black and white on a sort of a gray background, and it makes it so that it's very obvious that he is the important thing. So the content of this story, right, just this guy on a boat, it matched the capabilities, but it also pushed it forwards. Another funny story, Mario is very much like this. The reason why Mario is a plumber, the whole reason why the entire story of Mario came to be, is that when they were trying to make a sideways facing side scroller character with this few pixels in it, they found that overalls and a hat and a mustache, this was like the smallest number of pixels for the simplest human shape that they could create that was visible to the eye and recognizable. And so they're like, well, I guess he's going to be a plumber. And then they matched the whole story just to that. And here is, of course, my favorite example of this. Toy Story, the first full feature-length CG movie. You guys ever notice anything about the content and the medium of Toy Story? Well, the thing that I notice is that Toy Story came out at a time where CG, or computer-generated graphics, were incapable of making things that were human-looking or flexible. We couldn't do hair. We couldn't do anything that really didn't look like, that was organic. And if you tried to do anything like that, it came out looking plasticky. So the guys over at Pixar are geniuses, and I guess they had a conversation where they said, hey, everything looks plasticky. I guess let's make something that looks like it's made of plastic. So that's my talk. Questions, comments, ideas? Oh, somebody's asking about the Views camera. That's the Nokia camera. I haven't used it, so I can't really speak to it. What's my favorite experience made in Sprawly? Let me link you guys to the public view. There hasn't been very much published, honestly. Most people who are working on this stuff have really been working on it in private. So here's a couple of pieces that you guys can take a look at. Obviously, I really like some of the ones that I've made, and we have a couple more that are coming that are going to be very exciting. We're working on one with trying to expose what's going on in tent cities here in Seattle. What are my thoughts about VR and cinema as the core? The frame is something that vanishes. Yeah, it's hard, right? But at the same time, it's kind of amazing, right? Because the frame vanishes, you no longer have I forgot how to say it in French, but what's in the frame, right? You sort of just have like what's in the bubble. You don't know where people are looking. A really good example, well, let me find this for you guys. There's a great example that The Verge put out like a year ago that shows ways to use infographic type effects to direct the viewer's eye. And so like really, like we haven't changed everything. You always needed to direct the viewer's eye, even in a rectangular movie. Now you just have more work to do on that. Yeah, it's a totally new kind of cinema. It's immersive cinema. I know I spoke mostly about 360 today, but when we start getting into holographic and we start getting into point clouds, we're really not talking about 360 video. 360 video is just, 360 video, that term, that's like the moving picture of immersive cinema. Immersive cinema, I think, is going to be this giant new thing that all these new technologies are going to all come together and produce. And game engines could actually even be a part of that. But yeah, immersive cinema is where we're going. So I will catch you guys later. Please tweet at me if you have any other questions, and I will respond to you as quickly as I can. And everybody go sign up for Sprawly and tell all your friends to do so too. Thanks, guys. Bye.